Hello, you're watching Al24 News World News Program. I'm your host, Melissa Nokhemilet, and these are the headlines. President Tebboune invites Arab leaders to participate in the upcoming Arab summit scheduled to be held on November 1st and 2nd. A protest takes place near the Armenian government building and people demand the resignation of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Also in our news, Russia's President Vladimir Putin tells Chinese leader Xi Jinping on Thursday that Moscow backs Beijing's One China policy. Also coming up, Sweden's Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson announces her resignation on Wednesday after losing the election. And British people pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest-serving monarch. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune honored on Wednesday at the People's Palace in Algiers the members of the national junior football team under 17 years who won the Arab Cup. The honoring also included the brilliant athletes of the Islamic Solidarity Games in Konya in Turkey, as well as athletes with special needs and a number of winners in various regional and international sporting events.
لاعب الدفاع بالفريق الوطني للناشئين لأقل من 17 سنة يحظى بشهادة تقدير وعرفان.
On the sidelines of the 19th session of the Algerian-Mauritanian Joint Committee of Cooperation, Algerian Prime Minister Ayman bin Abd al-Rahman and his Mauritanian counterpart Mohamed Ould Bilal Messoud unanimously agreed on the success of the summit, which culminated in the signing of 26 agreements concerning many sectors. Bin Abd al-Rahman reiterated that the two countries will work together to increase the volume of economic and commercial exchanges.
Today, within the framework of the work of the Algerian-Mauritanian Higher Joint Committee, we have devoted the directives of the leaders of the two countries, and I have informed His Excellency President Al-Ghazouani of the outcomes of all these meetings held by experts, technicians and ministers, which culminated in the signing of 26 agreements affecting all sectors.
It was a successful session to innovate a new follow-up mechanism, which is represented by a follow-up committee supervised by the ministers, such as employment and infrastructure ministers, and everyone who supervises the implementation of these agreements closely.
Algeria advances the preparatory work for the Arab summit scheduled to be held in November 2nd. Or 1st and 2nd, President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune sent a letter to the President of the Libyan Presidential Council, Mohammed Yunus al-Menfi, to participate in the upcoming Arab Summit in Algeria. The President also sent an official invitation to Bahrain monarch Hamad bin Isa bin Salman Al Khalifa to participate in the summit. Minister of Energy and Mines Mohammed Arqab handed over the invitation letter as a special envoy to the Algerian President. Previously, President Tebboune had sent official invitations to both President of Mauritania Mohammed Ould Sheikh Al-Ghazouani and Sultan of Oman Haytham bin Tariq. Both head of states expressed their willingness to participate in the summit. A Palestinian youth was shot dead and two others injured by Zionist forces in Kafr Dan village. Early Thursday, Palestinian Ministry of Health said that Udda Saleh died with a headshot and declared that the death toll of Palestinians reached 149 since the beginning of the year. Elsewhere, Zionists stormed the village and raided the homes and of Ahmed and Abdul Rahman Abid, who were killed after a shooting attack at the Jamala military checkpoint Wednesday. A protest took place near the Armenian government building. People demanded the resignation of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. The protest was provoked by the Prime Minister's announcement in which he allegedly planned to sign a peace treaty with Azerbaijan. The citizens of Armenia consider the document a surrender and Pashinyan as a traitor. Russia's President Vladimir Putin told the Chinese leader Xi Jinping on Thursday that Moscow backs Beijing's One China policy, opposes provocations by the United States in the Taiwan Strait, and values China's balanced position on Ukraine. The two leaders were meeting on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Uzbekistan. It was their first face-to-face meeting since Russia launched its special military operation in Ukraine in February.
Attempts to create unipolar world have recently taken an absolutely ugly form and are totally unacceptable.
In the face of an ever-changing world, times and history, China stands ready to make efforts with Russia to assume the role of great powers and play a guiding role in bringing stability and positive energy to a world shaken by social unrest.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said during a press conference where he was asked about his meeting of the day before with the Russian president that Vladimir Putin does not consider the war in Ukraine a mistake. Meanwhile, Olaf Scholz expressed his opinion that Russia should withdraw its soldiers.
The second question referred to the conversation I had with the Russian president. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you that the realization has grown over there by now that this was a mistake to start this war, and there has been no indication that new attitudes are emerging there now.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that his country's forces have reached more advances in the eastern part of the country. Ukrainian leader also visited the recently recaptured regions of Kharkiv and Izium as he assessed the damage on the ground, emphasizing on the necessity of reconstructing the damaged areas. Osama Ayadi reports.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Thursday that the northeastern Kharkiv region had been almost entirely retaken from Russian troops. Zelensky also claimed the recapture of almost 400 settlements since Kyiv launched a counteroffensive in the area last week. However, Russia was still striking from behind the front line, despite the fact that Ukrainians were increasingly pushing back towards the border.
On the first day of active operations alone, our troops advanced 80 kilometers. In 5 days of fighting, 110 kilometers were covered. In total, almost 500 settlements were deoccupied. The 150,000 Ukrainians who remained in this territory feel again now what an ordinary, safe, normal life is like.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the war-scarred city of Izium, which was recently recaptured, a rare foray outside the capital that highlighted Moscow's retreat in the face of a surprising Ukrainian counteroffensive.
It's necessary to restore everything, same as here. The head of the region and the mayor are now reporting to me, and little by little, something is being done for the people. It's challenging, in general not easy.
The Ukrainian flag was raised in front of the burned-out City Hall building in the largely devastated town, where apartment buildings are blackened by fire and pockmarked by artillery strikes.
It might be possible to occupy territories of our country, but it's certainly impossible to occupy our people. The Ukrainian people. Perhaps it's possible to brainwash people with lies on television, but it's definitely impossible to do this with the hearts of Ukrainians.
The war in Ukraine is still seeing major developments every day. Russian forces are regrouping in the eastern region of the Donbass, while the Ukrainian army has made noticeable gains in most of the eastern part of the country. However, this does not seem to be the final stage of the Russian military operation on the territory of its neighboring country.
The right-wing coalition in Sweden secured a slim majority in the Swedish parliament and marked a political shift in the Scandinavian nation. Magdalena Andersson said she would step down as prime minister, and leader of the moderate party, Ulf Kristersson, planned to form a new government. Islam Seed has the details.
After a tight contest in the Swedish parliamentary election, Wednesday's results marked a turning point in the country's politics, after the right-wing coalition has held the lead with 176 seats in the 349-seat parliament to the center-left's 173 seats. Despite the incomplete election result, Sweden's Social Democrat Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson accepted defeat. handing the four-party right-wing opposition bloc a victory.
The four right-wing parties appear to have received just under 50% of the votes in the election and in the Riksdag. They have gained one or two mandates. A thin majority, but it is majority. Tomorrow I will therefore request my dismissal as Prime Minister, and the responsibility for the continued process will now pass to the Parliament Speaker and the Riksdag.
The leader of the Swedish moderate party, Ulf Kristersson, celebrated the early victory and put himself in a position as the right bloc's runner to be a prime minister and was ready to form a new government.
But in a week's time, I hope we are in the midst of discussing the next government's tasks. We have 2 weeks to go before the parliament opens again, and I'm going to do everything I can to have a quick and smooth and very good negotiation after the result is ready tonight.
Many Swedes haven't been satisfied by the results and expressed worries of our right party's roots, from the white supremacist fringe to its anti-immigration policy. Sweden Democrats have been avoided by all major parties since they entered parliament in 2010, but now they're on the peak of gaining influence over the government policies.
It's a sad sign of the times that we're living in, that they can profile themselves on scaring the people with that it's unsafe to live in Sweden with all the criminals and all the activities and so forth.
So it's scary. It's strange. No, I think that we are seeing idiocracy gaining more and more ground everywhere.
Commanding only a thin majority, Kristersson, as a new prime minister, would face many challenges amid downturn of the country's cost of living. Weaknesses in the welfare system revealed by the pandemic need to be filled, and an expected increase in defense budget is planned. Measures to combat climate change and long-term energy strategy also need to be worked out.
British people started streaming through Westminster Hall on Wednesday afternoon to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth II. Britain's longest-serving monarch will lie in state for 4 days until her funeral on Monday, with hundreds of thousands of people expected to file past. Zahra Farjani reports the full story.
Thousands of people began paying their respects to Britain's longest-serving monarch at Westminster Hall on Wednesday, where Queen Elizabeth II was lying in state for 4 days until her funeral. Shortly after 5 p.m. local time, members of the public were allowed to file past the late monarch's coffin in the center of the vast medieval hall, flanked by guards. Mourners moved down steps under the hall's great stained glass window, then past the coffin at a steady pace.
We were all very nervous with the anticipation of how we would feel, very emotional, and we all really noticed, so the soldiers on guard at the four corners, we really felt that she was being guarded by them and protected.
Everyone complete quiet, and I guess I was fortunate to see the changing of the guard, and all that was done in real silence.
Many mourners who were in tears wore black suits and ties, while some doffed their hats and even curtsied in respect of the late Queen. Others came from abroad to pay their respect.
She was a symbol of respect, the old days. She was a lady who lived through a lot. I've been here since 9 a.m. and for me it was very important to pay tribute to her one last time.
The Queen's death placed the country in 10 days of national mourning. Her state funeral will take place on Monday, September 19th at Westminster Abbey, with massive crowds expected to watch the procession.
The United States on Wednesday announced that it would transfer $3.5 billion in Afghan central bank assets into a new Swiss-based trust fund that will be shielded from the Taliban and used to help stabilize Afghanistan's collapsed economy. Afghanistan's Taliban government has dismissed the Biden administration's plan to transfer frozen Afghan assets, asking the U.S. to send the seized money directly to the Afghan central bank. The United States government sanctioned this Wednesday 10 Iranians and 2 organizations which it links to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and accuses of having carried out cyber attacks, some of them with ransomware, that is, by hijacking data. According to the Joe Biden administration, those sanctioned are part of a group of hackers that would have carried out cyber attacks against the US and other countries since 2020, accessing computers without authorization and extracting data, among other actions.
We're here today to announce that the office has obtained an indictment charging 3 Iranian nationals for directing a massive global computer hacking scheme and ransomware scheme. As alleged in the indictment, the cyber criminals attacked hundreds of victims around the world, including here in New Jersey and elsewhere in the United States, as well as in the United Kingdom, Israel, and even in Iran, where they operated. Not only was this scheme massive, but it focused on particular types of victims. As alleged, these defendants hacked the computer systems of public agencies and entities that provided critical infrastructure services like medical care, power, and transportation.
A second day of airstrikes against the capital of Ethiopia's northern Tigray region killed 10 people, while local forces accused troops from neighboring Eritrea of again joining the war against them. Ethiopia's government, which has been fighting the Tigray People's Liberation Front since late 2020, did not immediately respond to requests for comment on the airstrikes, fighting, or presence of Eritrean troops. The European Commission announced new measures which will cap the revenue of electricity producers that are making extraordinary profits because of the effects of Russia's war in Ukraine. Hossein Berkan compiled this report for us.
In order to deal with the rising energy prices, the European Commission has proposed an emergency intervention in European energy markets to alleviate the growing pressure that the energy bill is putting on European households and businesses. The executive is taking a new step to address this problem. The European Commission proposed the obligation to reduce electricity consumption by at least 5% during the hour's selected maximum price.
It brings a European reduction in electricity consumption of 10%. During peak hours, electricity consumption must go down at least 5%, so we avoid using the most expensive gas-fired power plants and bring down the price of energy.
The German chancellor, in turn, announced that he wants a reform of electricity market applicable from this winter in his country that goes accordingly with the European Commission's recommendations.
Deshalb haben wir Entscheidungen getroffen. We've taken the decision to reform the electricity market. It's inconceivable that those who produce electricity with wind energy, solar energy, hydropower, coal or nuclear energy do additional benefits, because the price is determined according to the electricity produced with the gas. We are making this change in agreement with the European Union.
The EU Commission proposed also a cap on excess revenue, which will bring solidarity from energy companies with abnormally high profits to their struggling customers.
A cap on the revenues of companies that produce electricity at low costs. These companies are making revenues they never accounted for. In these times, profits must be shared and channeled to those who need it most.
These measures are a continuation of those previously agreed on topping up gas storage and reducing gas demand. The Commission also continues to work to improve the liquidity of market operators and reduce the price of gas to prepare for the coming winter that promises to be really long.
Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro said on Wednesday that Venezuela is ready to supply the global oil and gas market in coordination with the OPEC Plus alliance led by Saudi Arabia and Russia. Let's take a listen.
Venezuela is ready and willing to fulfill its role in supplying a stable and secure manner the oil and gas market that the world economy needs. We are ready to gradually and rapidly increase oil production, develop and increase production of refined products.
For a second day, Haitians demonstrated in Port-au-Prince over the government's, announcement of yet another increase in gas prices. More this report by Sofiane Kantouri.
Thousands of Haitians took the streets of Port-au-Prince for the second day of demonstrations of another hike in gas prices announced by the government. Protesters started blocking the main streets of the capital in early morning using burning tires.
With the situation here now, we want the government to leave the country. We're buying gasoline at $2,500 gourds.
The new announcement by the government came at a time when Haitians are already struggling with fuel prices, unemployment and widespread violence. In the middle of demonstrations, calls and banners for ousting of Prime Minister Ariel Henry, who took over the country after the assassination of President Jovenel Moise in July 2021.
We as Haitians do not recognize Ariel Henry. We did not vote for him. He doesn't have a mandate nor legitimacy to be where he is.
Shops, schools and banks were closed since the protests started. Many stores were broken by some gangs in addition to steal. Meanwhile, no injuries or deaths were reported in the day's incident. In Haiti, gangs are fighting each other for control of territory and hundreds have died in turf war, while thousands have had to flee their homes to escape the violence. The government has made an agreement which included increased spending on social services and infrastructure, and improved tax collection in an effort to modernize the economy of one of the poorest nations in Western Hemisphere.
Hundreds of high school and university students marched through downtown San Diego on Wednesday, calling for improvements in Chile's education system and a new constitution. The protest ended in clashes with police forces as the students tried to reach the Ministry of Education. The official student organization's demands range from better internet access, infrastructure-free transportation, and a number of other demands. Argentina, the South American country which has been battling debt and currency crisis for years, is grappling with bringing down one of the world's highest inflation rates by 79% in August, which, according to a recent central bank poll, will end 2022 at 95%. Rising prices, especially food and fuel, are hurting Argentina's economy, which has damaged the center-left Peronist government of President Alberto Fernandez ahead of general elections next year.
Yesterday I went to the supermarket and I came back home with a bad feeling. I told my children it couldn't be possible that in a few days prices rise this way. From one week to the next one you spend double.
Detroit's main automakers are presenting their electric vehicles at the Detroit Auto Show, one of North America's largest auto exhibitions, in an effort to catch up with Tesla. According to Chevrolet Vice President, the Equinox electric SUV with a starting price of $30,000 will probably make America's general public think considerably about or more about electric propulsion systems.
So key messages here, things that are, we think, going to really excite people and get probably a lot more mainstream America thinking about electric propulsion systems, is a starting price at around $30,000. I mean, there's a lot of questions about not just our own production, our own sales volume, but just general EV adoption and general critical mass. Clearly, 24 will be a big year for us. We'll sell more and produce more in 24 than we do in 23. We'll produce and sell more in 25 than we do in 24. That's why we've made significant announcements and investments in cell capacity, battery plants, and manufacturing to make sure that we can meet the demand that we know is going to be forthcoming in the marketplace.
And now for more world news, let's follow this report.
A fast-growing California wildfire was threatening a string of small foothill communities northeast of Sacramento, even as firefighters made progress containing a flame that had grown rapidly the day before. The mosquito fire has burned nearly 509,000 acres, forcing the evacuation of some 101,000 people. World Health Organization chief stated the end of the COVID-19 pandemic is in sight, and he said that if we don't see this opportunity, we run the risk of having more variants, more deaths, more disruptions, and more uncertainty. According to the latest epidemiological report published by the WHO and devoted to COVID-19, the number of cases fell by 12% during the week of August to September compared to the previous week.
We have never been in a better position to end the pandemic. We're not there yet, but the end is in sight.
Jordanian teams rescued an infant and worked to save others from the rubble of a collapsed building on Wednesday. Officials stated they had arrested 3 people in connection to the disaster. State media claimed at least 9 people were killed and 10 other people were injured, while others remained missing.
I work on the basis that they are still alive, and this is the base we're following our operation. If I thought they were dead, I would have destroyed the building and worked in a more comfortable way. But I assume they are still alive, so we don't hurt them. Therefore, we are working with a cautious optimism.
A Burkina Faso court handed a suspended sentence for manslaughter to 2 managers of mine, where 8 miners died in flood disaster in April. The accident happened at a mine owned by Canada's Trevally Mining in Perkua capital Ouagadougou.
That's it for today's World News. For more news stories, don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.